I didn't flinch. I just stood there, holding a plate of food I hadn't touched, while my dad looked me dead in the eye and said the words I'd been dreading for months. Your brother's business isn't going to save itself. You have the money. You know what you need to do. 40 people were standing in my parents' backyard. My cousin had strung up those little Edison lights my mom had always wanted. There was a banner, handmade, slightly crooked. That read, "Congratulations, Nolan." My brother had just gotten a small business loan approved. Everyone was celebrating like he'd won the Nobel Prize. And my dad was standing in the corner, talking to me about my savings account. I smiled. Not because anything was funny. I smiled because I had learned, a long time ago, that my face was the only thing in that family I still had control over. I need to back up, because if I just start with that night, you're not going to understand why I didn't say a single word. You're going to think I was weak. Or scared. And I need you to understand. I wasn't either of those things. Not anymore. I'm the oldest of three. My brother Nolan is 3 years younger than me. My sister is the youngest. She's the one my parents introduce first at every gathering. The one whose framed photos go on the mantle. The one who can do no wrong, simply by virtue of being the baby. And then there's me. The responsible one. The one who figured it out. The one who, according to my dad, always lands on her feet. That phrase. I've heard it my whole life. She always lands on her feet. Like I'm a cat. Like my ability to survive difficult situations is just a personality quirk, not the result of years of having no safety net and building one for myself from scratch. I moved out at 22. Not because things were unbearable. I want to be clear about that. My parents aren't monsters. They love me, in the way that some parents love the child they think doesn't need anything. I left because I realized I was disappearing inside that house. Every time Nolan had a crisis, every time my sister needed something, I became the solution. The financial shock buffer. The emotional shock absorber. And the moment I solved the problem, I became invisible again until the next one. So I left. I got a job in logistics. Not glamorous, not exciting, but stable. I got promoted twice in 3 years. I started putting money away. Not a lot at first. $30 here, $50 there. Then $100. Then more. I lived in a studio apartment for 4 years, with furniture I bought secondhand, and a kitchen where the burner on the left didn't work. I packed my lunch every day. I drove a 2011 Honda Civic that I'd paid for in cash, and I kept it until the air conditioning gave out. I didn't tell my family any of this. Not because I was ashamed, because I had learned early that information in my family was not neutral. Information was currency, and the moment my parents knew I had money, that money became everyone's money. I know that sounds harsh, but I watched it happen with my uncle. He inherited a little from my grandmother. Not a fortune, just enough to matter, and within 2 years, half of it was gone. Loans to cousins that were never repaid. A family investment in Nolan's first failed business. My parents had good intentions. They always do. But good intentions don't replace a retirement fund. So I kept my mouth shut and I kept saving. By the time I was 29, I had enough for a down payment. Not a big house. A small one, 3 bedrooms, older neighborhood, needed work. But mine. I closed on it, in March, on a Tuesday, in a law office that smelled like old carpet and coffee, and I signed my name on the last page and I thought, no one can take this from me. I didn't tell a single person in my family. I kept renting a room from a coworker for appearance's sake. I told my mom I'd moved to a different place. She'd never visited anyway. I put the house in an LLC I'd set up the year before, on the advice of a real estate attorney I'd found through a friend. It wasn't complicated. It was just quiet. Intentional. I spent weekends fixing the place up myself. New paint. New light fixtures. I retiled the bathroom over 2 weekends, watching YouTube tutorials and making a mess and starting over. My neighbor, a retired contractor named Mr. Oduya who had lived on that street for 30 years, used to bring me coffee and watch me work and say, "You're doing it wrong, but you'll figure it out." He was always right. I always figured it out. I was genuinely happy. For the first time in a long time, I was building something that was only mine. Then my brother Nolan got a loan. Nolan is not a bad person. I want to say that clearly. He's charming, he's funny, he means well. But Nolan has never in his life been made to sit with the consequences of his own decisions. When he failed out of his first semester of college, my parents paid for him to retake the classes. When his first car got repossessed, my dad co-signed on a new one. When his first business, some kind of meal prep delivery thing, collapsed. After 8 months, my family threw him a fresh start dinner and pooled together money to help him get back on his feet. No one threw me a dinner when I paid off my car. This time, Nolan had gotten a real loan, an actual SBA loan, to open a gym. I'll give him credit. He had a plan this time. He had a location picked out, a rough business model, a contractor quote. He was trying. I genuinely hoped it would work. The party was my parents' idea. They wanted to celebrate, and I went. Because I love my family. And because refusing to go to things creates more problems than it solves. And because I was 31 years old and I had learned to pick my battles. I was standing by the drink table, holding a plate with a piece of chicken on it, when my dad came and stood next to me. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask how I was doing. He looked out at the yard, at Nolan laughing with his friends, and he said, "We need to talk about something." I should have walked away right then. "Nolan's loan payments start in 4 months," he said. "The gym won't be turning a profit by then. You know how these things go." I said nothing. "You've got that savings," he said. "We're not asking for all of it. Just enough to cover the first 6 months of payments while he gets on his feet. You always land on your feet." There it was. I looked at him. He was holding a beer and watching my brother across the yard with this expression on his face. Proud, indulgent, slightly worried. The expression he'd worn my entire childhood, but never aimed at me. "How much are the payments?" I asked. $2,200 a month. $13,000. He was asking me to hand over $13,000 so my brother wouldn't have to face the early consequences of a loan he had voluntarily taken out. "I'll think about it," I said. He looked at me. "Don't think too long. The first payment is in 4 months. Then he walked away to refill his beer, and I stood there with my untouched plate, and I smiled. Because that was the moment I knew. I left early. I said I had an early morning, which was true. On my way home, I called my attorney. She's a real estate and business attorney I'd worked with for 2 years, at that point. And she was the kind of person who answered texts on Sunday evenings without making you feel bad about it. I didn't tell her what to do. I just told her what had happened and asked her what my options were. She already knew about the LLC. She already knew about the house. We talked for 20 minutes, and by the end of the call, I had a plan. I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Over the next 3 weeks, I said nothing. I went to Sunday dinners. I asked my brother how the contractor was coming along. I brought my mom flowers for no reason. I was present, warm, normal. My dad brought up the money twice more. Once at dinner, casually, like he was reminding me to pick up milk, and once in a phone call where he said, a little less casually, "I hope you've been thinking about what we talked about." Each time I said, "I'm working on it." Each time he seemed satisfied with that. What I was actually doing was working with my attorney to prepare a set of documents. Lease agreements, formal notices, a complete paper trail going back 2 years, showing the LLC as sole owner of the property. Everything clean, everything legal, everything dated. Here's the thing my family didn't know. About 8 months earlier, my parents had started having some trouble with their landlord. Their rental house. They'd been renting for 12 years, never bought, had been sold to a developer, and they'd gotten a notice that they'd need to vacate within 6 months. My mom had called me in a panic. And because I am who I am, because I could not watch my parents be homeless, even while they were driving me quietly insane, I had offered them a solution. I told them they could stay in a property I managed. I said it was owned by a client, through the LLC, which was technically true, since I was the LLC, and that I could get them a very low rent while they figured out their next step. I told them the client was flexible and kind and just needed a reliable tenant. They never asked to meet the client. They moved in 6 months ago. They had been paying $800 a month. I had been depositing it directly into a maintenance fund for the property. They thought they were doing me a favor by being good tenants. They thought the client was someone I was helping professionally. My dad did not know. When he stood in his own backyard asking me to hand over $13,000, that he was standing on my property. My mom did not know that the low rent they'd been so grateful for was my doing. Nolan did not know any of it. The party was in their backyard. My backyard. My dad called on a Wednesday morning, 4 weeks after the party, and his voice had shifted. Less patient now. Slightly harder. "We need an answer," he said. "Nolan's met with the contractor twice more, and costs have gone up slightly. We're looking at closer to $2,500 a month now. $15,000. "I understand," I said. "Can we talk about it in person?" "I'd like to come by this weekend." He sounded relieved. I think he thought that meant yes. "Come Saturday," he said. "Your mother's making lunch." I got there at noon. My mom had made pot roast. My sister was there. She lived across town but came for family things. Nolan was there, with his girlfriend. My dad was at the head of the table, in the good mood he gets when he thinks things are going his way. I sat down. I ate lunch. I listened to Nolan talk about the gym, the equipment he'd ordered, the membership pricing structure, his vision for the space. He was excited. I could see it was real. I genuinely hoped for him. After the plates were cleared, my dad leaned back and looked at me with that particular expression. The one that meant, "Okay, let's get to it." "So?" he said. I reached into my bag and took out a folder. I set it on the table. My mom looked at it the way people look at something that doesn't quite make sense yet. "What's this?" my dad asked. "I've been thinking about our conversation," I said, "and I want to be honest with you." He nodded. Confident. Still thinking this was going his way. "I'm not going to be able to help with Nolan's loan payments," I said. The table got quiet. "I'm not going to be able to do that because I've been managing my own financial obligations. And, going forward, those obligations are going to take priority." I kept my voice level. "The property you're currently renting, I need to let you know that the ownership situation has changed, and I'm going to need to renegotiate the terms of your tenancy." My dad frowned. "What does that have to do with?" "The property is mine," I said. "It has been since before you moved in. The LLC you've been paying rent to is mine. I'm the client." Nobody said anything. My mom's hand moved to her mouth. "I'm not asking you to leave," I said quickly, because I watched my mom's face go pale and I needed her to hear that. "I am not asking you to leave, but I need you to understand the full picture." I opened the folder. Inside were 2 documents. The first was the LLC registration, with my name as the sole member. The second was a formal lease agreement. A real one, at fair market rate for the area, which was $1,400 a month rather than $800. "The current arrangement was informal," I said. "Going forward, if you'd like to continue living there, I'd like to put a proper lease in place. Fair market rate, standard terms, 60 days to decide." My dad had not moved. His beer was sitting in front of him and he hadn't touched it. "You've been our landlord," he said. Not a question, just a sentence he was trying to understand. "Yes. This whole time." "Yes." He picked up the lease agreement and looked at it and set it down again. My sister was watching me with an expression I'd never seen on her face before, something between shock and, if I was reading it right, a very reluctant admiration. "You said it was a client," my dad said. "It is a client. I am the client. Technically accurate. That's..." He stopped. Started again. "You deceived us." I had thought about this moment. I had rehearsed it, actually, sitting in my kitchen 2 nights earlier, talking out loud to my own walls, like a person who has spent too much time alone and doesn't mind it. "I protected myself," I said, "which is something I have had to do my entire life, because no one else was doing it for me." The room was very quiet. When I bought that house, I had been saving for 7 years, on my own, without any help, without any financial support, without anyone asking me how I was doing. And the moment my family found out I had anything, I gestured at the folder, at Nolan, at the table, at all of it. "This is what happens. I get asked to give it away." Nolan said quietly, "I didn't ask you to give me anything." "No," I said, "you didn't. And I want to be clear, this isn't about you. I hope the gym works. I genuinely do. But Dad asked me to cover your loan payments from my personal savings. And I need you all to understand that my savings are not a family emergency fund." My dad looked like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the words. My mom was crying, quietly, into a napkin, and I hated that. I hated that part. I had not wanted to make her cry. I love you, I said, and I meant it. I am not doing this to hurt you. I'm doing this because I have spent 31 years being the person who figures it out, and I need you to know that figuring it out has a cost, and that cost has been mine, alone, every single time. I left the lease agreements on the table. I drove home. I sat in my kitchen, and I cried a little. Not because I regretted it, but because doing the right thing for yourself can feel like loss even when it's correct. Grief doesn't always mean you made the wrong choice. Sometimes it just means the truth is sad. My mom called that night. She wasn't angry. She was quiet and a little shaky, and she said, "I didn't know you were struggling." "I wasn't struggling," I said. "I was building." There's a difference. I just wasn't telling anyone because every time I've had anything, it stopped being mine. She didn't say anything for a long moment. Then she said, "The house is beautiful." "Yeah," I said. "I know." She asked if she could come see it sometime. "Not the rental, my house. The one I actually lived in." I said yes. My dad took longer. He called 2 weeks later on a Sunday morning, and the call was short and uncomfortable and ended with him saying, "I suppose I understand why you did what you did, even if I don't like how you did it." That was as close to an acknowledgement as I was going to get, and I had made my peace with that. Nolan signed up for a deferred payment plan with his lender. Turns out that was an option all along. He just hadn't looked for it because historically, looking for solutions had never been necessary. Someone always handed one to him. This time, no one did, and he found one himself. The gym opened 4 months later. I went to the opening. Nolan hugged me and didn't bring up any of it, and I think that was the right call from both of us. My parents signed the new lease, $1,400 a month, 12-month term, standard terms. My mom has since turned the back bedroom into a craft room. She sent me a photo of it. There are things I want you to take from this if you've listened this far. The first is, quiet is not weakness. I did not yell. I did not send a paragraph text at midnight. I did not make a scene at the party. I smiled, and I left, and I executed a plan I had been building for years, and when the moment came, I was ready. The second is, protecting yourself is not the same as betraying your family. I did not take anything from them. I did not lie about anything that mattered. I built something of my own, and I protected it, and I stood in that truth when it counted. The third is, LLC. Seriously. Talk to an attorney. It costs less than you think, and it changed my entire relationship with risk. And the last one, the one I think about most, is this. I used to think that always landing on my feet was just who I was. A trait, a personality feature. Something fixed, like eye color. But I land on my feet because I built the ground beneath them, 1 year and one decision at a time, when no one was watching and no one was helping, and no one even thought to ask. That is, mine. No one can take it from me. Not even the people I love.